Hello everyone, and welcome to a Playing by the Pound adjacent episode, where we are going into something called the Vore discussion series. This is something created by SpottedSqueak over on FA. We're going to be discussing the first episode of this discussion series he's written. We're going to be reading it over, and then we can discuss. Active discussion with the Twitch audience, and those of you on YouTube, though, don't feel left out. Feel free to leave a comment about your opinion. It's okay what your opinion is, as long as you're respectful in sharing it. But the first episode is on Fatal/Perma Vore. And basically what this discussion series is a serious deep dive into different subject matters involving Vore. Vore is a very diverse interest, and there's a lot of people liking it different ways, and sometimes people arguing it different ways as well. So this discussion series seeks to basically have a serious look into different aspects of Vore. So, Fatal/Perma Vore. This is an interesting topic. And also, for those unaware, SpottedSqueak is over on FA. I'll link to his FA account in the YouTube description. He's a pretty cool guy. He does Vore art and obviously these essays. He's got a lot of cool stuff, mostly starring his mouse FOMO. There's all sorts of good stuff. Go check him out. He's really cool. But also, I guess I should also note, as the title screen image here shows, also the thumbnail, this is art that he drew for this Fatal/Perma Vore discussion. I colored it for the sake of a thumbnail, so all credit to him for the wonderful art. I just threw on some colors, nothing special. But anyways, here's the actual article. There are two of these so far. There are two Vore discussion series so far, and he plans on doing more. We're only going to discuss the first one today. We'll do the other topic he's discussed at a later date. These are written in first person by SpottedSqueak, so any sort of me sort of dialogue in these documents is referring to SpottedSqueak. I'm just going to read them straight out. For starters, we're just going to read the article, and then we'll discuss it. So again, written by SpottedSqueak. Let's go ahead and read this. Welcome to the initial entry in my Vore discussion series, Does This Make Me a Bad Person? I'll be covering topics related to Vore in general that I've seen division around, try to address said divisions, / explain why they're there, and offer solutions going forward. Because really, this is all supposed to be fun and or harmless, and if it becomes more than that, then obviously something's gone wrong. Since there are very few academic papers written on fetishes in general, much less Vore of all things, I'm going to be making a lot of comparisons and trying to appeal to logic over knee-jerk, this is terrible, you are terrible reactions a lot of people seem to employ. Stay with me here as we dive in headfirst. I will note that I did not cover much of the sexuality aspect of things, as I'll be covering that in my very next Vore discussion, so keep that in mind while reading if questions / comments about that pop up. Today's topic is Fatal/Perma Vore. So, what do I mean by Fatal/Perma Vore? For the sake of this write-up, I am not comparing soft versus hard Vore on top of Fatal Vore. Soft Vore meaning swallowing whole and relatively unhurt in most cases, versus swallowing in pieces for hard Vore, oftentimes mixed in with gore. There's variations on this. Soft, hard Vore is a fun one, candy food stuff, etc. But for now, this is merely the idea of Fatal Vore in all its forms, not specifically oral, though that's my only real experience of it. Fatal Vore always carries with it some variations of permanence. This could be a picture where a character is removed or dies for one picture, story or setting. For all intents and purposes, that character is removed from continuity and no longer appears. I've heard it called non-reforming / perma / ruining, and a bunch of other terms, but it basically means the same thing. That character, in that setting, however broad or narrow they may be, no longer exists. They are killed off, in other words. Now, why is that so upsetting? There's many different, nuanced reasons for this. On one hand, that character is being killed off. They're gone, no longer in the same form they once were, maybe just fat on the predator's body and that's it. This is understandably very upsetting if you think about it long enough. They're gone. You won't see them any longer. What about their family, their friends, their loved ones? That predator, that devourer, they're a monster, a murderer. In any rational, normal setting, this is a deeply unsettling prospect. But there's really nothing rational about Vore or fetishes in general. If my time in the furry fandom and off FA in general has taught me anything, it's that anything can and will appeal to someone. Feet / paws, noses, breasts, butts, legs, even more obtuse things like the dysphoria of no longer being yourself via transformation. That airy, heady, full filling and stretch from inflation. Even the very sensations of having an extra limb in the form of a tail. Imagination is the only limitation in terms of what's appealing or not to a person. It's no different than with Vore. Okay, so what? All fetishes are, invariably, idealized versions of their respective experiences. Take pregnancy, for example. Growing up in my family, I've seen just how rough pregnancy can be. The pains of it, the tiring nature of caring for and carrying another tiny person inside your body for 9 months, the fact that raising a child is very draining. A 24/7 job. There are many, many things that are just not appealing about the real-life situation. But when it comes to fetish art, stories, you don't even need to consider any of those factors. There's no diapers to change, no worry about balancing food and money, no screaming child waking up at 3 a.m. and not going back to sleep. There's only the joy of motherhood and the healthy glow of a pregnant belly. This is especially true of male pregnancy. All of the real-life equivalents are excluded for the sake of making the idea, the fetish, more alluring. Vore is exactly the same. There's no real-world equivalent to compare it to. We're not talking about cannibalism here, geez. But just think about the process of eating food. It may be an enjoyable experience, but for the food, even in the case of non-fatal Vore, being in a belly without harm is an active suspension of disbelief. Oh, my character only digests such and such, or I can control my belly acids, or I have a separate friend-only storage belly, or the list goes on and on. One must work to be able to say, this form of Vore that I enjoy is completely and utterly harmless. You craft a scenario that works for what you want to do, for your ideal likes and interests. Same applies to fatal Vore as well. Yes, it can be cruel. Yes, it could have repercussions. Yes, it could have people dying forever. But why choose to include those factors at all? You could just easily say, yeah, this happens every day, it's a part of life, and go from there. You don't have to deal with things unless you choose to. In any other setting, someone who indulges like that may be a murderer, but in an ideal setting, maybe they're not. Maybe they're just like any number of others, and that's the norm. It doesn't have to be an issue, because you do not have to apply real-world logic and values to what is basically an imaginary scenario. There's no reason to. But doesn't this glorify death? I've heard this a lot, and it's quite upsetting. But if you're killing off people, doesn't that mean you're just reveling in their deaths? What kind of person does that? There's several implications to this in particular I'd like to touch on. Number one, that they're actually killing off real people. Number two, that anything but utter revulsion at death is wrong. And number three, that people who engage in fatal Vore are terrible people because of this. First off, there's a degree of separation one needs from things like this. You simply cannot treat everything you see or read as if it's happened to a real-life person. Do you throw a fit when someone dies in a movie? Or in a novel you read? Or on some drama? No one would be able to enjoy anything, because we'd all be constantly miserable over characters that are removed from a story. However, on some level, everyone realizes that it's fake. Those are actors. This story was planned. Yes, they're gone in this setting, but that doesn't mean that it's time to hold a funeral and notify their next of kin. There's a suspension of disbelief that one has to make that makes all of that work. It's upsetting when someone in a movie dies because it's designed to have that impact it's intended. So the idea that fatal Vore is wrong due to killing off actual people, or their equivalent, is incorrect. The same standards as reality don't apply. It's all an act, a show. So if everything and everyone involved is made up, why is any of this a bad thing? Is this reveling in the death of another? Isn't that wrong? My response is that doesn't even matter. Death doesn't have to be something to fear, and I would venture to say that on some small level, engaging in a form of play or an expression around such things may help someone deal with that inevitability. I would argue that it takes away some of death's power. For a real-world equivalent, De los Muertos runs on a similar concept. Death is idealized, made playful, one could say even normal. We dress up like skeletons and run around, talk about family and friends who pass on, etc. It's not something to fear, but something to accept. So who's to say doing so in fatal Vore art and stories isn't the same sort of thing, done however conscious or unconsciously? Now this doesn't mean this is always the case. There's also the relation between power fantasies, belonging, feelings of being wanted, etc. I'm just trying to show a different view on things. There are other viewpoints besides this is terrible and wrong when it comes to fetishes. While looking up information for this paper, I looked up a few things on more extreme mainline fetishes, such as BDSM. I know that from as far back as I can remember, on TV and movies with other people, if any hint of BDSM was mentioned, it was always in a negative light. People who engage in such things are seen as deviants, as weird, as strange, as not good people. However, based on studies, these people have a higher level of trust, less anxiety, and are more vocal about their desires and wants, and have better communication in general. The fetish they prefer doesn't define their being, but in fact helps them deal with and handle real-life situations. I started to draw parallels to fatal Vore as well, if only tenuously. I know it's not the same for everyone, but I'm making a generalization here. As an example, an RP may involve a predator and prey, and that predator completely and utterly dominates that prey, leaving nothing of them left just to satisfy their hunger. Afterwards, the parties take their respective characters, thank each other, and walk off. For that entire time, one person puts their fate into the hands of the other, and that other person works with them to mold out a scenario that they can both enjoy, whether the devoured character appears again or not. Yes, it may be cruel. Yes, it may be mean. But it's agreed upon by both parties. There's something being forced, and no one is unhappy with the outcome. The same can be said for individual pictures and ideas. This is all what the creators wanted to happen. There's nothing wrong there. I found that Vore, and Fatal Vore in particular, deals with a lot of positive reinforcement, at least in some aspects. The sense of belonging to someone, of being useful, being close to someone, especially someone you care about, even if it's as food. Yes, it sounds a bit wild, but that's what these sort of things are. Any fetish sounds absolutely crazy if you look at it from the viewpoint of someone who it doesn't appeal to. Finally, none of this makes someone a bad person. As I've stated, there's reasons for everything if you dig deep enough. In my humble opinion, there's some very clear limitations between something being harmless and imaginary, and it being harmful and hurtful. So long as Vore is imaginary with no real-world impact, it's perfectly fine in all of its aspects. Fatal, non-fatal, any combination, it's all perfectly safe and okay. Now, if it gets to the point of obsession, of affecting your real life and relationships, that's a very clear distinction there for me. If it gets to the point where you want to somehow do any of it in real life, yes, that's a clear sign to seek help. Nothing in this particular fetish is harmful at all when kept within boundaries. There is no correlation between Fatal Vore and any sort of detrimental effects to the person participating or their place in society. I would, however, enjoy seeing a study on this outside of my own observations. But I still don't like it. That is perfectly alright too. I'm not advocating everyone get into Fatal Vore, merely that there's no reason to judge someone based upon it. There are ways a thing can cause unintentional harm to an external party without physical damage to a person. This is true of many fetishes. If you don't like it, it can be repulsive or even seem nauseating. Gore is a good example of something that's very hit or miss with others. If you're not involved with the fetish, most likely it doesn't appeal to you in the slightest. It can make you feel physically ill, or give you nightmares in a more extreme case. Let me give a clear example based on my own experiences. When I first discovered what Vore was, I didn't know about digestion or Fatal Vore or anything like that. I thought, oh, someone ends up in a belly? That's pretty cool. My very first experience with Fatal Vore of any kind was a story about a griffin and his two dragon friends, an older sister and a younger brother, stumbling across humans for the first time ever. They eventually decide on eating said humans, devouring the tearful brother and sister pair of humans, and the griffin and older dragon laid around digesting them before the story abruptly ended. Let me tell you, I was majorly screwed up after reading that story for a week or so afterwards. I felt nauseous. I felt ashamed to even have read it. I even ended up writing my own alternate ending where they were rescued, just so I wouldn't feel so helpless about their situation. It got to the point where all I could think about, how someone could write something so terrible that people liked it, was even worse to me. I got angry and tried to figure out if I could message the artist directly. I have no idea what I would have written in that, but I was young and I felt like I needed to do something, anything. But at some point, I took a step back. Yes, I didn't like it. Yes, it made me sick to my stomach. But I had to figure out why, right? How would I express what was wrong to the author unless I did? I started making comparisons. I had seen movies, read books with much, much worse things done to much more fleshed out characters. Characters with established backstories being killed off in horrible ways just for plot purposes. Why did two nameless humans being eaten in a random story I found on the net bother me as much as it did? I didn't know. I didn't have an answer to that. I'm still not sure I did, but I know I calmed down after making that connection. It wasn't real. It didn't actually happen. There was no reason to feel like I needed to save anyone. If I wanted, I could write my own version and change things, or just write something completely different. Remove parts entirely. I think that's what I did. I started to disconnect the story from reality. Realized that there was no reason to bring my own thoughts and viewpoints into things. In the real world, yes, this was terrible, but in a fantasy world, terrible things are the name of the game. Trolls and orcs destroying villages didn't make me bat an eye. Younglings slaughtered by a hero. Entire cities wiped out in an instant. Why should this anger me so much? I feel that once I made that connection, that this was a fantasy and I shouldn't get so upset over it, I finally calmed down. I did choose never to read that story again, at least for a few years though. It may help to think of things in a similar fashion. They are not your characters. You do not really know them. They are not real people. Think of them as actors playing a role. They're on a show. This is how their character ends in the show. That's it. That is nowhere near as bad as thinking they're real living beings who were just erased from existence. Think of them in that way only brings about misunderstanding and self-inflicted misery. There's no reason to do so. Okay, so solutions? Now, I mentioned self-inflicted misery, but honestly, for anyone still struggling with seeing things they don't want to on this site, for Affinity, where the article is written, there's really not many options. Without working thumbnails, you can easily see something upsetting that you'd rather not deal with, be it Vore, Gore, or something else. Without ways to filter content, you're unable to avoid said content completely. Every Vore picture you click on may be something that upsets you in some way, so it's a gamble to go about browsing for artwork. On a website as large as Ave, that really shouldn't be something that happens. It really does need filters. That's why I wrote my Filter Affinity browser extension, which I think still works if you want to go look for it on Chrome and Firefox, just to avoid things I need eye bleach for. That's true, he did make a filter. I wonder if it's still working these days. This article was written a while ago. Whatever you do, do not blame or harass the artist for drawing what they enjoy. If it does not go against site rules, you should not be calling them out on it. They literally have 0 ways to prevent you from seeing it when you may not want to. Sure, they could not post it, but realize that there are likes outside of what you yourself find attractive. Others can enjoy their content even if you do not. Take a step back, think about the situation, and move on. Maybe petition Dragonier to fix some of these issues and make the site more accessible and enjoyable for everyone. Using my filter extension, I barely ever see something that bothers me on the site anymore, and it's much more peaceful and relaxing because of it. And if none of this will work for you, I think there's some soul searching to be done. Or just move along and pay no attention to the artist. Don't make others miserable or make them regret posting things just because they do not align with your own tastes. Conclusion. In closing, I'd like to reiterate the points outlined above. Fatal Vore is just as harmless and imaginary as any other type of Vore, regardless of content. Its usage need not reflect badly on the parties involved, because there's many different, valid opinions for its appeal. And try to remember that no real person is actually being hurt, only imaginary characters. And while I understand the emotional/mental distress that can come from these types of ideas for someone unaccustomed to them, reminding oneself that things are by no means real, and in fact framing them as actors playing a role, may help with understanding this. I know it helps me. Thanks again for listening, and I hope this helps everyone further understand why Fatal Vore is not all that bad, and maybe stop berating me for including some of it in my own work. Please stop doing that, lol. There's also a few links to articles and stuff that he referred to. I will be linking up this entire PDF that he posted on FA. I'll be linking that in the YouTube description as well, though I will also post it for the sake of those in the stream as well. Just a moment on that. In fact, let's go over to SpottedSqueak's page for a sec. So obviously, I was reading this all in first person. This is not my thoughts directly. These are entirely Spotted's. But I do actually align with a lot of these thoughts. I think that he makes a lot of really great points. Let me go ahead and just grab this real fast. Because, yeah, his Vore discussion series, he put a lot of time into it, as you can probably tell from that article. Now, while I was reading that, I obviously was not reading your guys' thoughts, nor sharing my own thoughts. You can find the article via this, but it's also on, or a more direct link can be found here. But let's go ahead and discuss Spotted a little bit before we get into the discussion of the article. Because I didn't really talk too much about who he is as a person. Now, granted, I don't know him too well, but he has a big comic series involving a lot of different characters. And Fomo the Mouse is his main one, his main character. It's a mouse. This character has a whole backstory that he wrote for him and showed in an origin story comic as well. He's basically it's a anthro world of furries where Vore is kind of a norm. And being a mouse, he always got picked on, and people tried to eat him because he's a mouse, he's a prey animal. And he basically got fed up with it and reversed it on people and got to figuring out how to be a predator. And now he's effectively he very much enjoys it. He oftentimes tricks other predators into his stomach because they don't expect him to be the more apex predator, basically. He's a very good character, well written. And while he does gurgle people, and indeed other people gurgle other people in this universe, it's never done particularly harshly. Also, the art's just really good. FOMO's quite the tease, as you can tell. I love his art. Very good art. I love his character. Like, just, he does put care into, like, character backstory and design, and just how they act and such. And it just makes me very happy to see somebody putting that extra thought into things. Yes, things are still fanciful with this art. You know, like, the consequences of gurgling people is not hugely touched upon all the time, but it is still, like, it still does support plot points and stuff. I really like his art. I really like how he does build characters. But that being said, do check out his account. Very, very much recommended. Here's a link directly to that, too. Also, most of his art, I have the safe for work filter on there for obvious reasons. I show you guys that. But honestly, almost his entire gallery is safe for work, so you guys can go enjoy that very easily. So about this article, right? I wasn't sharing my thoughts as I went through this, and if you guys were sharing your thoughts in the stream, I wasn't reading that while I was reading this, but I think let's go over the article one more time and let's address the points instead of just reading it directly. You guys got the general gist. Let's address certain details within the document now. So, first off, the general idea is that Fatal Vore and it should not be seen as this really harsh thing that people are inflicting upon real characters, because it's effectively like engaging in a play with actors and having a performance, having some of them die because that fits the narrative. Yeah, I could myself write an essay, but honestly, I'm not great at writing essays. So that's why I'm reading Spotted, because he did a bang-up job here. He meant this discussion for FA, but it was something that was a discussion piece. He always meant for people to talk about this, which is the reason I brought this to YouTube. It was the reason I brought this to Twitch, because I think this is something that should be discussed more. There's no perfectly right answer to any of this stuff. It's good to share your experiences, good to share your opinions, and however you like or dislike this is okay. The important thing is respecting each other, you know? Chat was mostly file where you read. Fair enough, fair enough. But yeah, so let's start getting some of your guys' thoughts as I also read over this and see what I'm re-skimming here, seeing if there's anything in particular I'd like to address. Honestly, instead of reading direct points, maybe I'll just address it as in general. So let me express my own thoughts on, like, Fatal Vore. So, first off, I think he did a good enough job explaining this, but there is a difference between Fatal and Perma Vore and Hard Vore. Hard Vore is the concept of something being, to be put it lightly, broken up before getting put in the belly. Essentially getting chewed up, etc. Hard Vore is essentially what you see predators do in real life. You know, killing the prey, ripping them up, eating them up. That's Hard Vore. And that's not what this article obviously discusses. Fatal/Perma Vore is more of a... It can involve Hard Vore, obviously, but more specifically, what a lot of Vorophiles enjoy when it comes to Fatal/Perma Vore is the idea of eating somebody whole, not hurting them on the way down, getting them into their gut and gurgling them up there. That is generally the way most people prefer to, well, digest their prey in Vore, if they wish to digest. That's the most common form I've seen, at least. Hard Vore, there are fans of Hard Vore out there, but they seem a little bit more of a minority by comparison, partially because it's just more fun to gulp somebody down all in one piece, a lot of times. But again, to each their own. There's always different interpretations, and what people enjoy is always going to vary. But my own personal opinions on the idea of digestion, which is essentially... So, I guess I should differentiate this, because he didn't do too good a job on that. Fatal and Perma Vore are technically different things. Fatal Vore is basically... At least from what I've seen, those words have been used slightly differently. Fatal and Perma Vore can mean kind of the same thing, where character is gurgled, character is gone. But I have seen Fatal Vore done for a picture, basically implying that the character passed away because they got gurgled and turned to fat. But Perma Vore is a specific word that I've seen used when sometimes I have seen people give their characters to a pred permanently. And what I mean by that is, it isn't just for that one scenario, it wasn't just for that one story, it wasn't just for that one picture or comic. They actually stop using that character after giving the character to the pred. The character is properly gone. And that's something, again, though, that is a consensual decision between the creator of the predator and the creator of the prey. That is something I've seen some people do, because they love that idea, that finality. like their character got gurgled into fat and that's the end of that character, is something that is appealing to some people who own prey characters. That is something I've seen some people do, and I think that's kind of cool in a way, especially when it's done certain ways. So one thing that isn't fully addressed is the emotional impact here. There are many ways that fatal Perma Vore can be done. It isn't always just as harsh as it sounds. Yes, the act of digestion is always kind of going to be harsh to some degree. Some people like to, again, since it's fiction and you can adjust things how you like, some people like to have the digestion be just kind of numb and it doesn't actually hurt. It just kind of, the character just kind of falls into unconsciousness and doesn't come back. Some people like it more violent. Some people like it with pain. But regardless of that, there's also a lot of times where the prey can be willing towards it too. I've seen some really interesting scenarios, like a predator animal and a prey animal out in the snow. They've been traveling for a while. They're both hungry. They're both kind of about to pass away because of the harsh weather. And the prey's like, you know what? Eat me. You know what? I want you to save yourself. And so there can be a lot of like really good storytelling with Fatal Vore. There can be a lot of really strong storytelling that can be done with that concept of gurgling, of digestion, death via Vore. Very meaningful moments between two characters. Stuff like that. It sometimes obviously can be more aggressive where the predator is eating unwilling prey, but there's been willing prey in that situation can make for quite a poignant scene as well. So, my own thoughts, and I will get to all your thoughts. Don't you worry. Feel free to share your thoughts at this point, guys. I will scroll up and read through. I do want to share my own thoughts about what I feel personally involving Fatal Vore, specifically digestion, as I usually refer to it as. I like it. It's not something that I do constantly. I'm very much a Vore switch with my main character, my Shadok self, or my other characters as well. Generally speaking, I'm pretty switch. I don't really consider myself to be specifically pred or specifically prey. Certain forms may change that. For instance, my Draconian Shadoxian form, pred only. Pred only, definitely. And there might be an exception to that eventually, but for now, yeah. But as far as actually digesting the things I eat, I'd say that typically in Vore fiction, when it's done, when I do it like maybe 2 out of 5 times. Like the majority of time, I generally just like to stomach people, put them in me, cart them around, fill the bulges and wait, and just enjoy having them in there and then spit them up harmlessly later. It's fun to do that just casually with friends or just to tease people or such. But there are times where I do get the gurgly mood. That mood is certainly there. And part of the appeal for that, for me, is the idea of gaining extra weight from eating people is kind of great, because I'm also a fat fur in addition to a vorophile. So I do like the idea of my character gaining pounds, jiggling, having a softer belly, etc., because they gurgle the mill. That's appealing to me. Even in those situations, though, I'm never sadistic about it in character. I don't like doing... I'm not against gurgling unwilling prey, but I don't do it violently. I don't do it sadistically, where I'm basically, like, tormenting them along the way. That's not my style. Even though I am a ghost dog and I can be quite spooky, that's not my style. I like it to be more chill. I like willing prey, generally, but I'm okay with unwilling now and then too. Again, it's suspension of disbelief. It's actors in a play, effectively, in most cases, you know? So, it's fine either way. But my own preferences, I'm generally kind of a softie, both fattily and heart-wise. So, I prefer things to be more peaceful, even if they might be unwilling. So that's kind of my own perspective on that matter. And vice versa, by the way. I'm also a switch, like I said. So even as prey, I also don't mind being digested now and then. Doesn't happen too often, but it definitely happens. So, you know, I certainly go both ways with that. So, yeah, that's my general perspective on that and how I operate. I very much prefer non-digestion a lot of times, but I'm just as fine with digestion. I don't really have any problem with it. I, again, don't consider it horrific or anything really that harsh, ultimately. It's not the way I do it. But let's go ahead and read over your guys' thoughts. So, let's see here. I'm going to do, actually, is capture the entire chat log and put it on a notepad, so that makes it a lot easier to read. Alright, so, let's see what we got here. Scrolling Twitch chats are annoying. Well, what do we got here? So, I'm going to start with bullyism, because I think that's where the talking point started. Bullyism says, I agree with the fact that some people like other things than you do. For example, what we were kind of hearing about Vore. So about Vore, just in general, Vore is such a diverse interest. There are so many ways to like it. There are so many ways to do it. There are so many perspectives and emotions and storylines you can work off of with it. So it's inevitable that Vore has people end up polarized against each other while still liking Vore. There are definitely numerous people who like Vore, but are against other people who like Vore a different way. That happens because it's such a diverse interest that in turn there are groups of people into this part or that part, and thus sometimes there are clashes. That's why this Vore discussion series exists in the first place. It exists to basically allow us to discuss these things where, you know, otherwise wouldn't be discussed. This is not something that generally is open to discussion, the more serious aspects of how the Vore community behaves, handles itself, and views each other. There's a lot of disrespect that goes around, actually, and sadly, between different people in the community, let alone those outside of the community, those who aren't into Vore at all, whether they are furry or not, and those who see Vore files and think, well, that's just disgusting, they just want to kill people, what the hell's up with that? That's a viewpoint I've seen a lot of times from, like, non-furries, and I think that's another reason why I wanted to bring this discussion to light, why I wanted to discuss it and bring it onto video, because I think this is something that is valuable to read even if you aren't into Vore. I think it's a good perspective on the matter, even if you aren't into this, and will never be into this, that's fine too. Just to give you guys a different viewpoint than, this is really weird, I don't understand this. Well, hopefully, I think SpottedSqueak did a good job explaining the mindset along the way of explaining this topic, so I hope this actually kind of brings a little more critical thinking to light for people. Let's keep going though. VG said, I do mostly agree with this article too, as long as it's fine as long as it's fictional. Part doesn't become a sweeping generalization of all media. All media must be considered individually. Just because it's fiction does not mean it's harmless. Some media can be harmful. For instance, a good example of harmful fiction is propaganda, when one side or another on a war sends out flyers to the other side saying, like, demonizing that side or whatever. Propaganda is an example of harmful fiction because it's aiming for the goal of changing people's minds towards a negative viewpoint, and basically to convince people of a reality that isn't true. Stuff like that is bad, but stuff like that is not the case with a lot of Vore fiction and such. That's usually just there to tell a story that is interesting to the writer, interesting to the author, interesting to the artist. There isn't any nefarious intent behind it. So Arch said, I could probably write an essay myself on Vore and the main things I've seen over the decades. I addressed this earlier, but if you ever do write an essay, I'd be interested to read it. Just want to say that. Let's see. There's so Arch also said there's three fundamental aspects to Vore: horror, comedy, and fetish. That's true. And sometimes Vore will lean more towards horror, and sometimes it'll lean more towards comedy. It kind of varies. But the comedy aspect is pretty obvious. Vore is silly. Vore often requires a suspension of disbelief as one creature that is the same size or... Obviously, Vore can be done in any size, but typically I see a lot of Vore be same-size Vore. Basically, one creature that is literally the same size as the other, consuming that creature. That's a bit comedic, because that is quite the stretch. It's almost a toonish stretch in most cases. Doesn't really quite make realistic sense, but it's fun. It's fun, it's fat, it's heavy, it's bulgy, it's entertaining. And obviously it's a fetish because it's fetish. Vore is a fetish. Maybe not for... Though how fetishy, or specifically how sexual Vore is, can vary. Vore very much is not always a sexual thing. I want to make this clear to anybody who doesn't understand this. Vore may be a fetish, but that does not necessarily mean that it is always sexual. There are those who like it sexually, but I know plenty of people who love Vore without a hint of sexual aspect to it. I know asexuals into Vore. People who literally basically don't have a sex drive. or any sexual interests outwardly. They just have it as a very strong interest. It's very entertaining to them or enjoyable. Now, keep in mind, some asexuals still do have some degree of sex drive, but I've met numerous that do and don't, so just want to disclaimer that. Meowskovich said, as long as it's consensual between the owners of the characters, I don't really see anything wrong. Exactly. Exactly. That's the important part. There is something I have unfortunately seen a lack of consent between owners of characters in Vore. I remember this one time that this one asshole drew a Vore picture where their character ate another person's character because they were mad at that person. They did not ask for permission. They just kind of did it as sort of a revenge thing. And that was uncool. But generally speaking, that is very much not the norm. That is the exception, that sort of thing. Fortunately, I don't see that happen very often. But basically, typically speaking, if two characters are in a picture and one gets gurgled, the owner of that the owner of the gurgled character is almost certainly okay with it. And if it isn't, it won't. It will be expressed somewhere, you know. But yeah, so Meowskovich also said, "I'm fond of weight gain from Vore." I am too. That's the reason I do the gurgles usually. I don't like the idea of the prey going to waste or just disappearing entirely. I like the idea that they add some wobble to my doggish frame, and I can go like, yeah, see, they're right there on my butt. You know? Like, I can go like, look what they did. They did a good job, you know? They did a good job. They added this wobble. But Fox also said, like, to be honest, Vore really isn't an interest to me. It's just meh exists kind of thing to me. But as a concept, I consider Fatal Vore like killing characters and stories. Decent when done well, but becomes cringe when overdone, done poorly. I agree with that. I think that I've read some stories that involve digestion, and the characters were just kind of killed off at a very... Like, I don't mind digestion at all. I don't mind the idea of a character getting killed off in fiction, but there's a good way to do it and a bad way to do it. And sometimes it's done so poorly that I just don't like reading it. And granted, you know, again, even in that situation, to each their own. If the author enjoyed writing it and it's not hurting anybody, then sure, that's fine. But I do like it when there's some weight or at least some value to the act. You know, there's some consideration that, this is kind of a big deal, you know? Just the fact, just treating the issue as, oh, this is kind of a big event. That's good enough for me, you know? As far as narrative goes, you know? It could be done kind of casually and still cute, though. I've seen some really silly gurgles where it's just cartoony and silly and like, oh no, they got the gurgles, and that's fine too. I've seen that done well too, where it's taken very lightheartedly, and it's actually a fun way to see it. I don't like to be too heavy with my gurgle Vore stuff, but sometimes I do write heavy stuff. Like for instance, my story for Sigra and Yonder, where Sigra the Awe and Yonder the Wolf. Sigra almost got digested, and it was an exceptionally emotional scene where Yonder rescued him. Because it was a serious matter for them. And that sort of stuff works well. Again, it's all about telling a good story, ultimately, is how I feel about it. Beerus said, Fatal is the character being digested, but the character's still around for future RPs or whatever. Perma is they're gone forever. Yeah. Yeah, some people have given up their characters entirely to another character or another person's pred. Because they like the idea of ending that character with that digestion, because that adds actual weight to the digestion, and that's appealing. And that's totally fine. It doesn't happen often, but you can see it here and there. I've seen a few people do it. I thought Perma was just Fatal without revival in the setting. So some people do treat it that way. Perma is a flexible word. It may not, just because somebody did Perma Vore does not mean the character is permanently gone. It's just that I have seen Perma Vore done where the character is gone for good after that point and doesn't show up again in the fiction. Or any fiction. So Perma Vore can be done without that weight. Just want to state that. But I have seen it done with that weight, and it's generally called Perma Vore in that situation. Again, these terms are typically flexible because there's no like hard rule with this stuff. Pop said, my thought after, I personally still would not like Fatal / Perma Vore, but I do agree with a lot of the things Spotted said. We have a main thing like comparing how Fatal / Perma isn't actually as bad as other things I've seen / read. And how it is fake, but like actors and not real characters. I get for others it's enjoyable, but for me personally, it's like the same reason why I don't like horror movies or horror games, because I just don't like the scenarios that can be made up. And see, that's very important to note. That's a completely valid and fair opinion. The thing is, though, the thing that is always important to remember when it comes to anything online, anything offline, any interest, any sort of anything out there that it counts as something somebody is interested in. If you aren't interested in it, that doesn't make you a bad person. That's totally fine. You have every right to not enjoy something. The important thing is to not bring down other people in that. If you don't enjoy it, let other people who do enjoy it still enjoy it. Unless they're actually hurting someone in real life. I think there can be a lot of harmony between people that like completely different things. There can be a mutual respect. Like, I'm not going to bring that up with you because I know you don't like it. And the other person will be like, okay, and I won't judge you for that because I know you like it. That's mutual respect right there, and I wish more people would do that. Keysquid said, for me, this whole conversation hinged on one thing specifically, a matter of the variation of Vore or its content, and that's consent. As long as the people behind the characters are happy with what's going on, I could care less for what they write their characters doing. So the topic of Vore and consent, that's a very interesting topic, and it's interesting you bring that up, Keysquid, because the second Vore discussion series, which we aren't covering today, but we will cover at a later date, is actually Vore and consent. So I won't talk too much about the consensual aspect, besides what I've already touched upon, because we can deep dive that into the second Vore discussion series, which we'll check out probably after my vacation. So if you're interested in the more consensual aspect of Vore and discussion that therein with that, make sure to come back for the second Vore discussion series, because, yeah, we'll talk about it then. So Pop said, along with how the characters can fill in these scenarios, whether it be fake or not, it makes me feel for the character in it. And see, that's just empathy. And empathy is totally good. And I can understand why empathy for a gurgled character would make you feel very sad and why you wouldn't want to see that. That's completely understandable. Though also, from my aspect, I am very empathetic too. When I see a character getting gurgled in a picture, and I know for a fact that there is consent between the artist and the character and such, basically that I know that outside of the fiction, everybody's okay with it. That my empathy goes towards the root of kind of, I'm glad this character could contribute to this character. That's kind of where my empathy goes with the matter a lot of times. Like, I'm glad that this character's nutrition will be well used. I'm glad that they have a purpose, they have a value. Granted, the story and fiction, the sort of Vore I most prefer is where the Predator does appreciate the praise contribution. That makes me happy. That makes me feel like everything was worth it. So let's see. I'm going to scroll through here. I'm obviously a little behind on your guys' messages. You just have a lot of good stuff to say. I'll catch up eventually. Let's see here. Hyper said, I'm primarily a pred. I still like being prey, but I can't do that for just anyone. Blame a few assholes for ruining it for everyone. Sadly, I understand what Hyper's talking about. I myself used to RP quite a bit and do Vore RPing as well. I remember being prey to a person who absolutely wanted there to be sadism in the RP. They had to do it harshly. And I consented to that because I tend to be flexible and kind of chill and easygoing, but I really didn't enjoy it. I really did not enjoy it at the end. I kind of felt like the guy was laying out his IRL ingression into the character, into the scene. I feel like that's sadism in that case, in that one person's case. I don't think that, by the way, I should disclaimer, just because somebody has a sadistic predator in fiction, that does not mean they are a bad person. That does not mean that they are doing bad things. It could still completely be consensual outside of the characters, outside of the fiction, for that scene to happen. Please do not judge those people. However, I have seen a few people where I think that the sadistic way they did the Vore was partially to express their own personal aggression, and I felt kind of uncomfortable with that. I don't think everybody's like that. Hell, I know one artist in particular, Sparky the Chew. Sparky the Chew is a wonderful person. A wonderful human being. He is a great guy. I've talked to him before. He is just so nice. He is like, he wouldn't harm a fly. But in his art, he draws a lot of macro stuff, and he's drawn macros like stepping on cities and people and squishing them and killing them. So some pretty violent art with gore. He's drawn some very violent art, but after talking to him in person, I can see that very much does not reflect on his actual personality. And I think that's important. He may like that stuff in fiction, but if he stepped on an anthill in real life, he would feel really bad about it. So you always got to consider the disconnect between fiction and reality. That's very important. And obviously, like SpottedSqueak said in this document, there are times where people don't separate fiction and reality. And in those situations, those people may be enjoying that fiction unhealthily because they are mixing it into how they feel in real life. That's not good. You got to balance it out. You got to keep it separate. You can, you know, you can express it in real life, of course, like I'm doing with just doing this discussion and talking about myself and this subject. But there's always, you always got to be able to take a step back. That's very important. And Arch said they'll me something that may surprise me. I'm going to see what that is when I scroll down more. VG says, I'm also a Switch. I just like tummies in general, especially when people are/were in them. Yeah. See, that's the thing. Like, that's the wholesome way I look at it when I gurgle people. When I myself am pred and I gurgle people in fiction. Just adding to the belly. Adding to the nice belly, making the nice belly nice and soft and better is just such a wholesome thing in my brain. With the way I enjoy it, the way I view it. It's very peaceful. And generally speaking, like I mentioned, I prefer willing prey. So, generally speaking, it's peaceful to them too. Silver said, Silver's Wolf 454 says, I stand on the outside of the fetish, but I'm not one to judge what others like to do. And see, that makes you a very respectable person in my eyes. Blake is still confused about the term fatal. To go over that again, fatal vor is generally digestion, yeah. Though I personally, oddly enough for me, at least specifically, I don't really use the term fatal vor. I don't use the term perma vore. I just say digestion, or my preferred way of saying it is gurgles. I prefer gurgles because, as I've kind of indicated at this point, I don't like to get super serious with most, like, digestion stuff. So I generally express it as they're getting gurgled because it's just kind of a more whimsical way to express it. It's a way that doesn't have a ton of weight, and that's kind of the way I prefer to enjoy that sort of thing. So for me and my vernacular, it's just gurgles. Gurgles is kind of my preferred term. So Arch said, with my own characters, I never do fatal of any kind, but either as predator or prey. But within my art collection, I've got quite a lot of fatal vor. Yeah, I have seen some fatal vor in your art collection, Arch. So it's like, I guess, so that fatal vor would be stuff that it doesn't involve your own characters, basically, which is fair. Karsher said you may only like one particular kind of as a kink. Yeah, it's another thing. Vor, some people love all sorts of different vor. Some people only like vor a very specific way. There's no wrong answer on the way to enjoy an interest. Hyper says I prefer non-fatal or at the very least reformation as prey, though I'm okay with being a fatal prey if the other person wants it. Same here. Same here. That's kind of my own viewpoint. Generally speaking, if I'm going to be non-feed down somebody in some fiction, I generally like it to be non-fatal. However, if they're particularly interested in it being gurgles, I'm totally down with doing gurgles as well. Sometimes I will ask for gurgles too if I know they're okay with it. But usually I have to be approached for that, and that's when I do it. Likewise when I'm prey. Arch said, I like all three aspects of vor, horror, comedy, and fetish. Most vor fans only really know the last. Most norms only know the first two. Yeah, it's true. So most people into vor only know the comedy and fetish aspect. They don't generally think about or want to think about the horror / serious / weightier side of the vor. While most norms, as in people not into vor, people not into fandom, people just looking at vor from the outside and seeing it as a big meme, as some people do. For instance, Beta on Beta Delora, or however you say his name. I don't really watch him, but I know that vor is kind of a meme on his channel, which kind of makes me a little uncomfortable because I don't really like vor as a meme. Because I feel like that's oversimplifying vor. I feel like that is perhaps doing more harm than good in some situations. Again, I prefer stuff like this where we're actually discussing a detailed topic involving it. But yeah, I think norms generally only know of the horror and comedy aspect. They either go, lol, that's stupid, why the fuck? Or they go, oh my god, that's terrible. That's generally what most people would generally feel about it. I mean, most people understand it's probably a fetish, but they don't really understand it, like, most of the time. And it's honest, them not understanding is kind of understandable, though, because vor is so diverse and complex that it does require a deep dive to start to actually understand it, which is what I hope that this video will accomplish for some people. Let's see. Beefy said, I'm prey, I don't know, but I only like non-death vor. That's fair. Good old belly pocketing is always nice. Let's see. VG's a little unique because they like fatal vor almost exclusively. I just don't get endo. See, that's fair too. I understand that, even though I'm very Switch VG, I understand that viewpoint quite clearly, because I can completely understand why it would be, I suppose, lame to have Vore not involve digestion. Because in your mind, VG, I'm sure it's like throwing somebody in a belly and nothing happens to them and they get back out. It's like it's a waste of time. I can understand that perspective from those who prefer digestion, that by the way, endosoma, that's the full word. Endosoma is basically the term meaning Vore that does not hurt other people. It's basically the general catch-all term for soft Vore, Vore without digestion, etc. So, yeah, I can understand why endo seems like effectively kind of pointless to some people that really prefer the, well, full aspects of Vore, of the full aspects of ingestion and digestion. Yeah, it makes sense. Fox said, I think you can actually draw a bit of a parallel to the transformation community in regards to a transformation that results in a permanent loss of self. In that regard, the old person is dead and the people are varied on that topic as well. I'd love to do a deep dive on transformation sometimes, because that's a good point too. Some people, like Carsters, for instance, or not Carsters, Kairio, sorry, mixing up my K's. Kairio, my good buddy Kairio, is very deep into transformation stuff. That's why he's an artist in it, and he loves it. And he's a pretty big fan of the human being completely lost in a transformation, if a human's turning into an animal, and that human going completely away. Me and him are slightly divided on that. I prefer the human keep their sentience, but have to battle against new feral instincts, and possibly risk losing themselves here and there. I like the human to be aware of the consequences of what has happened, but he does that too. Like he's varied as far as what he liked, but I think his preference is when the human is completely erased. And again, that's not too different from somebody digesting in a belly. Vore transformations share that loss of identity in that way. Sometimes, anyways. It depends on the Vore and it depends on the transformation. Karster says, as a consequence, in a lot of game systems, Vore is not supported, sadly. Yeah, I'm glad D&D kind of supports it, but Vore is honestly... That's the thing, too. Arch points out it's an old cartoon trope. Yes, Vore is not just a fetish. Vore didn't start with furries. Vore started in cartoons, in children's media, in books, in Aesop's fables. Old fairy tales had Vore. Vore is a literary device. Vore was a literary device before it was anything else. Vore served a purpose of a symbol. It served as a symbolic purpose for telling a story with morals and stuff. It was a great representation of this character is greedy, or this character is barbaric, or something like that sometimes. Vore has such deep origins. It's pun not intended, but still, there is so much to Vore beyond just, oh, furries are into that. And that's another reason I think Vore is worth talking about, because it has a lot of history. Blink asks, doesn't Anika and her husband use Vore to show their love for each other? Oh yeah, they're not the only couple that does. Me and Aragon do too. Some of my favorite pictures with Aragon, my boyfriend. I'll show an example. I'll show an example of one of my favorite. 1 second. So, I think this one is clean. Yes, this one. On the subject of so that's one thing I really love with Vore. Here we go. Check out this picture. This is a perfect example of just how amazing Vore can be. I'll actually divide this in two because it's so big. I want to zoom in on the panels, so I'll actually be cropping this randomly, so there'll be a little chaotic bit here. So Aragon's my boyfriend. He's a Charmander and I'm a Shaddox, so this was a wonderful picture series. So here's him coming home from work. I'm home, Aragon! And as a dog does when somebody comes home. I'm just gonna, like I said, crop this in sections, so. Aragon, I thought you'd never get home. Sorry, I'm sorry for being late again, Charm. You know what? Spooky dog. I should give you a timeout. What? Wait, Chomp. Gulp. Ah. Now you stay in there till you learn your lesson. I may never learn. I guess I'll just have to keep you in there for a long time then. This is a perfect example of my favorite way of enjoying Vore. I'm totally fine with digestion, but the reason I prefer soft Vore is for scenes like this, where an expression of love can be expressed via Vore. See, here's the thing: the most appealing way I look at Vore is when I do it with people I care about closely. Because in my book, in my opinion, stuff like this is like me giving Aragon the biggest, warmest, deepest hug I could possibly give him. What hug is deeper than squishing your entire insides around somebody? What protection could be better than putting somebody inside your own body? That's another aspect. Vore is protection. The idea of protecting someone by literally saying, nobody can hurt you unless they get through me. Literally through me, because you're inside me. There are so many wholesome aspects to Vore that I really enjoy. As much as I do, indeed, like gurgles now and then. Again, I like it both ways. I'm very varied in my interests. So, soft form of digestion aren't mutually exclusive. Yeah. I could gurgle up my mate lovingly as well. Let's see if I can keep going. I'm losing track of some of the messages now. They're going too fast. So James said, I mean this in the nicest way possible, but it's weird how I'm not even a furry and this shows up directly in my recommendations. Why are we talking about Vore anyways? Well, because it's an interesting topic and I feel like more people need to be educated about it. I've noticed something, even outside of furry communities, Vore has become more and more well-known. In the past, people had no idea what the fuck the word Vore even meant, but these days a lot of people do. So I think it's important at this point that we actually discuss it, because this term, this idea has been entering into the public consciousness more and more, but people don't understand it still. So I make this content to spread that understanding. Let's see here. Perma cannot be non-fatal things like living fat, said Tubby Squirrel. Yes, that's a weird concept. The idea that somebody's like their body dissolves, but their consciousness stays. For instance, I'm a ghost dog. I could digest somebody, but not in their existence entirely. As I am a ghost dog, as I am a spectral being capable of spectral abilities, I can take somebody's soul after digesting them and keep it safe with me. They're not completely gone. They may have lost their physicality, but I didn't delete them. In fact, I rather protect those sort of souls. It also means I could technically rebuild them. Probably not their original body, though. I could make them a Shadox. From that soul, I could introduce that soul to a new shell. If I wish to. If they wish to. Which is an interesting rebirth, actually. That's another thing. Vore can sometimes involve a change of being. Not just a deletion, but the idea of Vore turning somebody into something else. That has happened. I've seen that in Vore before. Vore and transformation, effectively. Let's see here. Fox said there's always the aspect of vit artwork where they are just rolling out something as a form of catharsis. Oh, you guys were commenting on when I was addressing somebody attacking somebody else's character. Vit art is fine, but generally should be kept to yourself. It should not be shared around, like this art unfortunately was. The one I talked about earlier. So, Hyper said, they tried to force their hypnosis fetish on me, the guy who you did Vore with that you didn't like. So they tried to force their hypnosis fetish on me seconds after I told them I wasn't into that. See, that's not right, because you already established, you established your rules. You established your do's and don'ts, and they broke that. That's disrespectful, not of the character, but of the person behind the character, and that's not good. Key Squid said, sadism, even in real life, can completely fine as long as both people are into it. That is actually BDSM, as addressed by this document. BDSM. Bondage, domination, slave master. is what it stands for those unaware. And basically it's the idea of usually a mix of pain and pleasure between two consenting individuals. There's usually safe words and boundaries always being set. A lot of times BDSM is done very, very appropriately, actually. It may be very odd for those outside of it, but it's usually done very carefully with proper boundaries being set. It's surprisingly respectful. And you may think, well, what's the point of getting hurt? Well, like, who would want to get hurt? What normal individual would like the idea of pain? And the weird thing is, guys, pain actually vents, like, tension. So, pain in small quantities, nothing permanent, nothing harmful, is not necessarily bad. It's a great way to kind of release tension. Surprisingly. Because there's plenty of ways to have pain happen without actually any damage. And again, that sort of masochism is actually something that also relates to Vore at times, which is totally fine. Tubby expressed, I enjoy the... Oh, let's see here. Actually, I'm going to do... Car said, I mean, I can understand having a sadistic character, but I nearly broke down into tears when I had to kill a mouse recently. Yeah. Because IRL, you had to end a life because it was a pest, and you had to get rid of it, and that's sad. I feel ya. Like, sometimes you have to get rid of pests in real life, and that sucks sometimes. Sometimes you feel bad about that. I've reached the point where I feel bad if I have to kill a spider. I didn't used to feel bad killing spiders, but I kind of dig the little guys now. So, I generally leave them alone. It helps that in Canada there's basically no poisonous spiders up here, so there's really no reason to mess with spiders up here. Because they're not going to hurt me. Tubby Squirrel said, I enjoy the animalistic domineering Vore, an expression of dominance of you are so far beneath me that you are food. I will eat you and you are nothing more than my breakfast. That's fair. Like the animalistic, feral, domineering, submission, domination, alpha sort of attitude is something that is quite appealing to me too sometimes. So Carr said, while I could be totally evil in a fictional setting with characters and stories, the simple reality is I don't wish honest harm on an innocent creature. Carr, you are a wonderful person. This is not something that doesn't even need to be stated, but yeah. I completely believe you when you say that. Let's see. Jones said, that's actually the thing about the art I do. Just because I like to do ODST art doesn't mean that I like ODST, that I'm like the ODST I draw in real life. And that's the thing, it isn't just Vore. There is so much fiction out there that so many people enjoy. You don't have to be a furry to enjoy fiction, obviously. There is tons of fiction out there that many people would enjoy, but would never actually want to enjoy in real life. Think of how many people play first-person shooters and absolutely love headshotting people and taking them out, and, like, you wouldn't like to do that in real life, at least. Ideally, I would hope that most people don't enjoy that sort of thing in life, but they do enjoy it in fiction. So really, it's not hard to take a step back and consider Vore and digestion in Vore as something beyond just this monstrous thing, because there are so many examples that anyone can take and go, well, I like this thing in fiction that I don't like in real life, so I understand it. Like, always take a step back and consider that there's always something that you probably like that you would never do in real life. You enjoy that thing in fiction, but you don't enjoy it in real life. And that's the thing with Vore, that's the thing with digestion, that's the thing with furries, that's the thing with all the weird things furries do that people judge furries on. It's fiction. Yeah, there are some bad people in the furry community, unfortunately. There are some people that can't separate fiction and reality. They keep their heads in the clouds, they don't consider those around them, they don't respect those around them, and engage in their fetishes in real life in inappropriate ways. There are sadly furries like that, but I'm here to say very distinctly, that is not the majority. That is a very small but very troubling minority of people. Unfortunately, like any fandom, there are bad people in this fandom. Because, unfortunately, when anything grows large enough, you're always going to have some bad eggs. So let's see. VG said, I knew someone like that who couldn't take a step back. He had such a problem with bad things happening to fictional characters that he'd constantly godmod and RPs to fix everyone's problems as fast as possible. That in itself is an example of a person who can't separate fiction and reality, and that's another sad sort of thing to see. Poizaz, I have some awfully sadistic interests, but I don't want to actually hurt anyone in real life. And I've seen that. I actually picked up on that, Poi, a long time ago. I picked up on some of your rather sadistic interests, but I understand that you're not a bad person, too. I could tell that I could tell that there was a disconnect between you and your interests, which is important. Selena said, "I am the same. Boy, I'm kind of very deep in the, oh, you say Vore is murder hot area." See, Selena here might enjoy Vore in a more violent sense, the way I generally don't do it. But if somebody I cared about approached me and wanted to have a really harsh Vore RP done, and I had time for it, I would probably oblige them. This Shadox can indeed be spooky. This Shadox can indeed, if desired by another RP partner, be kind of violent. It's not really who I am as a person at all, and it's not even who I am as a dog, as a character, as somebody in an RP. That's not really what I generally do. But I have to admit that sometimes I like to invoke fear. Sometimes I like to be the spooky dog. Generally speaking, when I like to be the spooky dog, I don't like to actually cause harm. I more like to cause heart attacks rather than actual harm. Not actual heart attacks, hopefully, but you know. See my Halloween 2020 video for a good example of how I like to scare people more than hurt them. But yeah. Blake said, "I guess I am like Charm and Hyper. I guess I prefer Monfail, but will gurgle for friends to an extent, I guess." Yeah. Flexibility is always good to have, you know? Gears of War 4 was the land of Vore meme, says Jonesy. I didn't play that. I'm gonna assume there's just some big creature that eats things. Key Squid commenting about Veda said it seems pretty harmless the way Beta jokes about it. It's not like they bash it. That's good. Shinkito says, "I really wish to talk about this, but did not feel put together enough to properly express it without rambling. The most I can say is my feelings are complex." That's completely fair. If you need some time to think about it, this video will be going up on YouTube, so you can always pop by there and leave a YouTube comment if you want to express yourself later. That goes for any of you. If you have any extra thoughts to add or want to leave a concrete thought down in a comment section where it won't disappear. Hyper said, "Even though I can still provide Fatal, I still hate it if the tone's too dark. I.e. Prey begging for its life and the Pred just shrugs it off." Yeah, that tends to make me kind of sad too. I don't mind some... If somebody asked me to Pred them in a violent way in an RP, I wouldn't do it in the really dark way. I do it more in the I'm a wild animal and I'm just hunting sort of way. Which is, you know, more Circle of Life-ish. Let's see, I'm gonna try to catch up here, hold on. Bulbasaur said, "I do like the domineering aspect, especially when the submissive character consents." There's a lot of sub-dom value to Vore. That's part of the appeal of it. Though sometimes it's equal parties, like that picture of me eating Aragon. That was not sub-dom. Yes, I overpowered him, but that was more of a play act. If he actually resisted, I would have stopped, even in that picture, even in that fictional scene. But the fact is, we're equals, and I did it because I loved him. Again, Vore can be enjoyed multiple ways. Sub-dom, equal partners, etc. Let's see. VG says, "There's no way to end it that's appealing to me involving Indo. Regurgitation is gross, fair, and the only alternative is to keep them in there forever, which is weird." I mean, you could take a third option and just pass them through the entire digestive tract without harming them. I have done that sometimes. That is called full tour. I find full tour appealing, but I can understand if you don't find it appealing, VG. Arch said, "Before I go prep for bed, I have one more thing. Intent is extremely important. If you want to tell a story with someone, and it is mutual, in the end, it's consensual. And one of the oldest writer's rules is, the more you abuse your characters, the more interesting the story is. Ryan thrives on conflict. Fatal Vore is a form of conflict that the prey loses." This is a sad but honest truth. It is more interesting when a character has abuse. Think of the characters that I have made. Think of the characters that I have worked with that you guys, my audience, have attached to. The picture I was working on Sunday and earlier today, Bodon the Balakath. How many of you guys find him more interesting, more somebody you could attach to because of the fact he's blind from birth? That's a sad detail. He's blind. But did that make him more interesting? I would bet most of you would say yes. Because it makes him have this unique trait. It makes him have different aspects to his other senses. It it doesn't make, it maybe makes you feel a little bit bad for him, but it just makes him more interesting, because when there's conflict, when things aren't perfect, a character becomes more interesting. When a character is challenged, when a character has to overcome something, when a character doesn't just have life handed out to them on an easy platter, that character has to work for life, that character becomes far more valuable, far more deep, far more relatable, because life sucks. And to see a character have to go through things much like we do in real life, well, that's relatable. So, yeah. Well, it may seem sad when a character has to go through things, at the same time, that makes them all the more connectable. It's kind of important for good storytelling. I mean, look at Sigra. Sigra! For those of you who haven't read Sigra and Yonder's story, I heavily recommend doing so. It's on the Vore Nothing channel. I've linked it a few times on that channel on my Discord, if you want to go check it out. Somebody could probably link it here if they want to. That'd be pretty cool. But Sigra and Yonder's story, I wrote an origin story for them, how they met, how their early life was. Sigra, poor fucking Sigra has PTSD. He was shoved into a belly where the pred then fell asleep, not intending to digest them. They were just trying to teach him a lesson, quote unquote. But he almost digested. He did digest, partially. Not enough to leave much permanent damage, but it was enough to damage his wings. And as he was trained to be a flyer, he was a Raven Eye Aw, which are basically some of the best flyers of the Aw species. He was learning to be a flyer, and then he was digested enough to ruin his wings, turn them lame, turn them useless, ruin his future. In addition to the stress and PTSD that whole event caused him. He was pulled out before... He was basically pulled out right before the light of his life was pretty much snuffed. He was saved just before it was too late. He should have sued the guy in the story. I don't think Aw World has lawyers. Maybe it does, I don't know. Ask Evoc that. But, yeah, so Sigra has a damn sad story, and he's PTSD, and he's very, he's very timid because of what happened, and, man, sad story, but man, did it add to his character development. It was so worth writing, even if it made me, I literally cried twice writing it. I have a heart. Even in dark, harsh events, I have a heart. I cried twice just writing his story because of how sad it made me. But I also knew that it was a good thing to write. I knew that this was what I wanted to write. That this was a good story. But yeah, Arch, I hope you sleep well. You probably already left by this point because I'm scrolling down the chat, but you sleep well. Let's see here. Pop commented on the comic earlier. The last line that Aragon said in that Vore comic was, after I said, I may have to keep you in there forever if you don't learn. And he said, hee hee, I may never learn. And Pop says, I just love that line. It just expresses so much love, to be honest. Yeah, it's really just wholesome. I love it. Key Squid said, I think people don't recognize or think about when talking about Vore is the concept of it came way before the fetish of it. It's more appreciation of the idea. Yeah, again, like we were discussing with old cartoons, and again, way back before even television was a thing, Aesop's fables and other fairy tales told to kids to keep them from doing bad things. Plenty of Vore. Big Bad Wolf is a great example. Three Little Pigs, another example. There's a lot of old fairy tales where a wolf wants to Vore things. I'm okay with this personally, but you know. I have to admit, sometimes I get in a really prayish mood where I want... So, Tubby said, I'm way opposite. I like not carrying the slightest what my food thinks. Oh, that's fair. That's another way to enjoy Vore. Sometimes I have been turned into sort of a prey slut, I guess I would say, where I see a character... For instance, actually a good example, FOMO, SpottedSqueak's mouse character, the one I was talking about earlier. FOMO is a character I kind of prey slut to. And what I mean by that is basically that if that mouse approached my Shadox and wanted to eat, churn, and digest him, I would be like, yes, please. Okay. So there are certain predators I get exceptionally submissive, when thinking about them eating me. Like, super duper submissive. And generally in those situations, I would like to be gurgled. Basically, like, yes, you're hot. I want to be your fat. Like everything about it. So the reason I like FOMO, the mouse, is that he has such a perfect personality. Not only is he like really attractive, just generally, but like the way he teases his prey, the way he eats them, the way he flaunts is just perfect. It's great. But yeah, Carcerus said, oh, Bullyism asked about the whole soul aspect. Can't you put their soul into another body? So, a Shadox who gurgles somebody and takes their soul can only put that soul into a Shadox body because a Shadox can build a Shadox body for another Shadox, technically. It may not be perfect. That Shadox will have to develop their own body over time, the new one, the new Shadox. But, a Shadox cannot put a soul into another body besides a Shadox shell. That's the only shell they can manipulate in that regard. They can take souls out of shells, but they can't put souls into shells unless it is a Shadox shell. If that makes sense. Carcerus said, this is dubiously safe for a video discussion, but Unbirth is a particular kind of Vore that can be very wholesome and loving. But in turn, there are also ways it can be predatory. There's someone I've heard that goes by Servo, I think, who uses it in a predatory manner. So that's okay, we can talk about this. I won't talk about it in super duper detail, but for those unaware of what Unbirth is, that is basically like it's birth, but the other direction. And this is indeed a form of Vore. There are multiple forms of Vore besides just eating orally. Another form of Vore, which we've discussed before, it's come up on my videos before, I'm totally okay to mention it. Anal Vore is basically where I use the butt end of my butt. The butt end of my butt. That's a redundant statement. I use my butt to eat. Because that's another way to the belly, ultimately, and also it's just a fun way to do it. It's a very silly way that I like doing because it's silly. It's also, I also like AV a lot because it's a safer direction, even if it's weird. Because while oral Vore goes right from the mouth to the throat and then down to the belly immediately, AV can just have the prey sit in the bowels, which is not nearly as dangerous an environment as the stomach. So I consider AV to be a more approachable, friendly form of Vore than oral Vore. That's just my viewpoint on it, though. Unbirth, though, female-only Vore, typically. You can have exceptions to that because fiction. But a female-focused type of Vore, Unbirth. Typically, that is seen as the most wholesome, endosoma-based, soft type of Vore, because typically speaking, that is a place of nurture, that is a place of warmth, comfort, and safety. Unbirth. And so I really like Unbirth in the aspect of that because it is a nice, safe place. And I do kind of prefer soft Vore, as I've expressed before. So I like that safe place aspect. There's a lot of meaning to that. Sally's favorite, of course. But even with Unbirth, I have, like Carcerus noted, I have seen it done with digestion. Which I don't personally like at all, actually. I do not like Unbirth digestion because it breaks the concept of what that area is supposed to mean to me and in general. So I don't like gurgles there, but to each their own, of course. That area is too precious to have me enjoy that, but I'm totally okay with other people enjoying that. Let's see. So, Tubby, you said being an aggressive Don, I typically establish the safety phrase on the reel. Yeah, even if you're RP with somebody, it might be good to have a safety phrase. A word you can say to just basically go like, okay, we need to stop there. You did something that I'm not comfortable with. It's good to have safe words, whether it's some real life, thing you're doing with somebody, or even an RP. I think it's a good idea. Yeah, Blink. Yeah. Also, on the subject of spiders, it's off topic, but after this discussion's over, I'll share a really cute video of a spider because I want to demonstrate why I started to love spiders more. So VG says, yeah, there's something about the circle of life aspect of Vore that I really like. I don't know if it's my lack of understanding about the pain things or if I may potentially be a type of berserker, but for me, the only thing pain ever does is induce rage. Oh, that's I'm sorry, Shinkito read the second line. You guys have the same name color. I thought it was the same person. My apologies. Let's go with VG first. So something about the circle of life aspect of Vore I really like. That's usually the way I like Violent Vore more when it comes to it being more of a pred-prey relationship. I'm just doing this to eat. This isn't me being mean. This is me eating, sustaining myself. It may be done harshly, but this is the, you know, because that's the thing. That's nature for you. That's just nature. Nature can be fucking brutal, but it's not usually done sadistically. There are exceptions. There are situations where animals can be sadistic. I remember this one time where 2 buffalo were being attacked by a bunch of wolves, and one of the buffalo crashed intentionally into his friend to knock his friend down, so his friend got grabbed by all the wolves and he got away. That was kind of fucking brutal. But again, you could, that is once again circle of life. Better you than me in this case, but it's like animals can be assholes, absolutely, but so Shinkito specifically said, though, I don't know if it's my lack of understanding about the pain thing, or if I may potentially just be a type of berserker, but for me the only thing pain ever does is induce rage. Oh, pain can be very, very much unenjoyable. It's all about the context when it comes to, like, BDSM and such. It's all about the context. It's all about the idea of, for me, what I find pain does, because I have to admit, like, I'm not exactly proud saying this, but I have self-harmed back in the day, and I don't do that anymore, but I can tell you back when I did, that was something of a release of stress for me. It was a way for me to feel something besides the bad emotions in my head. It gave me a distraction. And it's not, I would not say, the way I did it was not healthy. Absolutely not. But there are healthy ways to kind of enjoy, you know, pain and stuff in much safer, regulated, conditional ways. But let's see. So Bully has a mask. What do you think about Unwilling Vore? I think we've gone over that at this point. I'm fine with Unwilling Vore. I just don't like it being super sadistic. But Unwillingness is fun. Sometimes, like, it's a good hunt, for instance, for a Shadox like me. Somebody's trying to get away and stuff, and I have to hunt him down, leap on him and stuff. Like, that's exciting. That's a cool, you know, as far as a predator aspect, that's exciting. So, working for my food, in a way. But, let's see here. I'm scrolling through. Jones said, I've literally had people look at me and go, you're an ODST artist, so that means you're depressed and always listen to smooth jazz. That is hilariously stupid to just go, this person likes this, so I know everything about the person. That is so dumb. I wish people wouldn't do that sort of thing. People, I don't know why, that's how a lot of people judge an artist based on what they create, even though they may not be like they are in real life. What they are like in real life. Yeah. Simple fact, that's dumb to associate somebody based on what they like fictionally. Like, pretending that what they like fictionally decides who they are in real life. That's never a good thing. Let's see here. I'm gonna down the list. You guys have a lot of good shit to say, though. Appreciate that. Bullyism says I like Full Tour. Yeah, it's fun. Full Tour is amusing to me. I think it's very. It's just a. Full Tour is just kind of fun because, like, you get a full tour. It's literally a full tour. It also lets the prey enjoy the whole process of digestion without the digestion. Basically, too. Basically, they get the experience of being food without getting harmed, which is fun. Let's see here. He said, I say, yeah, it's not just that they've been in a bad situation. See how they adapt to the bad situation in different ways directly because of it. Ah, yes, on the subject matter of characters going through hardships and how that makes them more identifiable and makes them more enriching as characters. Arch also said, when it comes to characters, for the most part, my characters stick to comedy or to internal massage, but I'm starting to broaden out beyond that. I've created an anti-villain character that does almost only Fatal Vore. May I link her? You may absolutely link her. I'm sorry I was late about responding to that. I know who you're talking about. She's very mean, but she's also a very interesting character. I think it's a she anyways, if I recall. Shinkido, commenting about Badon, says the fact he's blind does not affect how I adore him. It would be the same if you could see. Oh yeah, he's still adorable even if he had his vision. I just like that extra, like for me personally, it adds a little bit more depth to his character that he is blind. It actually adds to his lazy personality, I would say. He doesn't overthink things so much because since he doesn't have vision, he works off of what he feels, what he thinks, what he senses through other means. When you don't have sight, it's a little hard to be judgmental. Also, thank you for linking earlier, Blink, the story for Cigarette Yonder. Heavily recommend you guys read it. Feel free to leave your comments on Vore Nothing on my Discord server. Always happy for more comments. That's also a place where you can go see their new art that was posted. Their first commissions, their first references. Let's see here. On the subject matter of Cigarette Yonder's story and All World in general, that's another reason I'm doing this discussion, actually. All World is a world that has Vore as a main focal point. It's part of their life, it's part of their history, their societies. It's ingrained in their culture. And that's why I love it so much, because it's not just there as a fetish. I mean, yeah, there's some value of it as, like, that's just fun because there's Vore in it. But it's a world beyond that, and it just has Vore in it. And I love that. I love that complexity. I love that depth. It's not just there to be a fetish, and that's great. That's why I like All World so much. Again, it furthers the concept of Vore, and I like that. So Arch said Nico Shikoba, that's the character. She would do anything for her tribe, but she is quite selfless, for the most part a very good chieftain, but she is utterly ruthless when it comes to what she sees in the best interest of her tribe, which is including devouring children. Well, you know, not a good person. In her eyes, she is. That's complex. That's polarizing, but that's complex. Also, good night, T-Bears. Let's see. But, yeah. So, VG, you actually have a Pred character with a personality similar to FOMO's. See, I like FOMO because he's a little bit flippant about who he digests. He doesn't care a whole ton about his prey, but he's so teasy and smooth about it that I can't really get mad at him. I can't really call him an asshole. I can't really call him barbaric, because he's just got such a way about him, FOMO, that just kind of works. It makes him work. It kind of convinces you. It turns you to his wiles, so to speak. And that's great. I love that. Oh, Hyper. Oh, Hyper. I saw that. So let's see here. Oh, I just realized something I missed. Oh, Hyper. A whole Hyper part 2. Hyper said, so if you called my favorite form hot, does that mean you'd want to get on by Hyper? I guess? Let's... I'm just gonna call attention away from what else he just said. Oh, Tubby said, sometimes I can make them change their Discord status to things like Brassica's fat. So that's a fun thing that some people like to do with digestion of characters. So if an owner of a Pred character digests the owner of a Prey character, sometimes one thing that is fun that people do, whether it's permanent or not, that digestion, is having the owner of the Prey character change their picture or status to like that, to the Pred's belly. To basically say, oh, I'm just fat now, I'm going to change my actual online status to reflect that, because I got gurgled. That's amusing. I like it when people do that. There was an old website called Gurgler. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was basically Facebook for Vore, and a lot of people on that did that sort of thing. Let's see here. I'm catching up. When I reach the bottom of this, that's the end of the discussion. Let's see. Let's see. Actually, that's pretty much it. So, VG, your pred is more someone who wants to be Altesian and smooth and seen as a big bad pred, but is also kind of a goofball. I like that. That's a complex personality. A self-made meme. Of course you would do a self-made meme, Hyper. VG said, "Oh, I've seen that. I believe it's called profile play." Maybe that is called profile play. Is there actually a term for it? Sure, why not? It's just kind of a little like, it's showing respect to the pred character, and it's showing like, it's kind of like, it's actually a little bit of like public exhibition at that point. The idea of like changing your profile because somebody nommed your character, and then like letting everybody else know that your character got nommed. That's public exhibition, which of course is itself an interest, a fetish. The idea of basically, oh, this is public. It is public that I got dominated. It's public that my character got dominated, digested, and taken over, and made submissive. And making that public, making that something that everybody else knows. Some people really enjoy that, and that's totally fine. Public exhibition is fine in fiction, and it's fine if done in the right communities. It can very easily turn into throwing that into people's faces that don't want to know. So it has to be done respectfully. It has to be done thoughtfully. The idea of public exhibition, because you don't want to just go out in actual public and let people know your character got gurgled or some other weird fetish. That's disrespectful to the general public. That's disrespectful to the general populace of whatever area of the internet you're on, unless of course you commit it to the right communities, the right places, the right channels. So it's very important for that to be done respectfully. But I do understand the interest, and I do like the interest as well. Actually, public exhibition can also be demonstrated very well within art. Say, I've seen some pictures where like a character is getting eaten at a bus stop, and there's other characters watching and like reacting to that. And that's a form of public exhibition too, like when a scenario is drawn out like that. Because it's like, the pred is just so bold and brazen to just do that in front of everyone, like in a scene. That's fun. But yeah, that's kind of the full discussion. Do you guys have any closing thoughts before we end this video segment? But yeah, I just feel free to express any closing thoughts you guys might have, any last points that you wanted to bring up. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this first episode of the Vore discussion series. Like I said, I'll be doing a second one at some point. I'll sneak peek of the thumbnail. Here. Check this out. Where'd I put it? There it is. Sneak peek of episode 2. Episode 2 of the Vore discussion series will be Vore and Consent. This is a very interesting one, and was kind of inspired by... SpottedSqueak wrote this one because of some stuff that actually directly happened to him that was bothering him. And I actually watched all this event happen, this event unfold that was bothering him. And so I have some personal investment into this matter and what he went through. So it'll be an interesting one to talk about. But that's for a later time. But closing thoughts. Tum be good. Yeah. Shinkito said, the best I can come up with. I'm okay with Vore to an extent. I'm okay with endosome and full tour under conditions. I can be okay with digestion so long as it's not the end for them, basically not permanent. I'm not okay with the end of a character's existence. That is fair. That is fair. When it comes to your own characters, that is completely respectable. If other people want to do that, I understand not liking it, but of course, you do have to respect their choices for their characters. Naturally. But, let's see here. Might have something for the YouTube comments. Feel free to go to the YouTube comments. YouTubers, YouTube watchers, feel free to leave a comment on this whole matter. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Just try to stay respectful, you know. Consider the fact that people may have different opinions than you, and that's okay. And if that's the case, feel free to speak candidly. Ark said, consent and intent is everything. Yes, indeed. And I will deep dive into that more on the second episode of the Vore discussion series. And as far as this series goes, I will be making more and more videos of this as long as SpottedSqueak keeps making more and more articles. It does seem like there is a bit of gap of time between the first and second one he's done, but it's very clear that he wants to make more as well. So you'll probably see me dotting these sort of videos around here and there whenever he makes another one. because I do find them very interesting. I think he has some really great thoughts. I think he's very mature with the way he approaches the matter, very official. He can write a way better essay than I ever could. I have a lot of good thoughts too, and I'm a good writer, but I'm just not concise enough to write an essay, especially an essay that is meant to be a discussion. Because to make a discussion, you have to have some brevity in your actual essay. Otherwise, it'll just confuse people or just kind of throw people off in such a way that they can't really respond to it. I think what he had here, 4 pages, just the right length, really. This is just the right length. Plenty of dialogue, but not so much that it becomes overwhelming. And again, like I said, links will be in the video description for this document, SpottedSqueak's profile, and yeah, those two things really. But yeah, good night to you, Arch. Thanks for sticking around. I know it's late for you, so thanks for that, though. You didn't have to stick around, but I appreciate it. Tubby said to Blake, "Oh gosh, when you swoon a pred and get to eat a pred, that is such a rush, like eating lobster, a rare treat." That's another thing. Vore is interesting because of hierarchy. Pred and prey relationships are pretty understandable. But another thing that is fun is an apex pred eating a lesser pred. That can be fun. Or even better when 2 preds wish to eat each other, and it's all a matter of, it's all a roll of the dice which one becomes victorious. And whichever pred bests the other pred has just proven themselves to be higher up on the food chain. That's exciting. That's a very interesting thing. So Tubby saying that's such a rush, that's very understandable. That is something I would love to do as a Shidoxian. When I get my new Shidoxian reference, it would be great to go up against another dragon again. I did that once in the old pre-redesigned form of Shidoxian, but that was not so much a fight. I'd love a proper fight for a scene. That'd be good. Arch said, "If you ever need help writing an essay, I'm a scientist by profession. I know all about writing concise and prove a point." Arch, I might take you up on that, because I would honestly love to get some other essays together. It's fun to read these things. It's fun to discuss these things. I love opening discussions with you guys. It's great to open discussions. Again, YouTube, I'll read your comments. I always read comments, but especially for a Vore discussions piece like this, I will definitely be checking over any comments you leave. So do leave a comment if you want to. I've seen scenarios in art where 2 predators are having a constant back and forth with Vore. I've seen art where one predator eats the other part way, but then that pred that was half eaten gets like a paw planted just right on the stomach or something to like gain the upper hand, get himself removed from the first pred, and then reverse the situation. That's pretty fun too. Just a nice good fight situation, you know? It's a good interesting, dramatic, energetic sort of thing to watch play out. But yeah, so that's, I think, a good conclusion for this first episode of the Vore discussion series about Perma Vore. So, VDS 1. I hope you guys enjoyed this discussion. Obviously, it's a little bit serious here and there, but I think it was nice. It was nice talking about this. It was nice just kind of going over this with you guys. SpottedSqueak, if you watch this video, dude, thank you very much for writing this article. I look forward to reviewing your other articles, and just keep being awesome, dude. But, yeah. That will be the end of this first Vore discussion series.